go north, further north, you got issues up there. So, yeah, we talk about it and we use that as sort of a phrase that we throw around, that that China's not part of us, and because we have different values. Look in the mirror, we've got some very interesting set of values in the Pacific regions ourselves.
A mention of this on the panel, I guess there's not a whole lot to say, but these are truly horrific things to happen to small communities. 30 people, most of them children, have died after a school bus just plunged into a gorge in a mountainous region in the north of India. They were all from one school, and social media users are propping up hockey sticks outside their doors in honour of the 15 Humboldt Broncos players and support staff killed in the terrible bus truck collision in Saskatchewan. And photos of sticks lined up outside people's homes have been trending under the hashtags Put Your Stick Out and Sticks Out for Humboldt, and the symbolic gesture has swept across North America. How on earth would life recover in a town of 6,000 people?
Yeah, I don't know. It's incredibly moving, isn't it? And it's a primal fear, I think. I was thinking about the Pied Piper of Hamelin. The reason that's such a terrifying fable is that the idea that your next generation, that all your children disappear, is one of the things that we, at a very basic level, fear. So, yeah, I don't know what you do about that. I mean, every now and then after you spent a day at Lollipops, you feel like a space without children would be nice, but only for 5 minutes.
Only for 5 minutes. Not all the players were from the town, but they were billeted in the town. One tribute left at the local sports arena was a Kraft macaroni and cheese dinner box, which was a favourite meal of deceased player Evan Thomas. And I'm sure we've all had a version of serious grief in our lives, and there's no one way, is there?
No.
There have been those holes in generations because of the two world wars that we have somehow managed to recover from. But I guess at the beginning of that, it seems impossible.
Before we go, I want to ask you about the continual tagging of Auckland's trains, because we've had such a reaction. And you may have heard what happened at the weekend, the taggers with the black masks and the GoPro cameras holding the train up for a quarter of an hour with the doors open and the paint fumes circulated through it, etc. And the more interesting aspect of this time was that passengers got off to have a go at the taggers, but were prevented from doing so. And there you have it. This is considerable reaction from listeners. I'll only get time for a couple, and then I wouldn't mind a comment from you. And there you have it. Everything wrong with society. Don't act, don't confront, don't hold to account. The idea the police are the only ones who have the moral authority to do anything about everything. Jim, the hopeless passive response of authorities to the tagging of trains is part of the problem, that society does not make its disapproval clearly felt. They should try vandalising trains in East Asia, because they would have their ears boxed by outraged grannies, and the authorities would deal with them very, very firmly. You don't see any graffiti on trains in Japan.
That's what we need. We need a whole system of outraged grannies. I've often said that. It's what you need is bouncers outside nightclubs, is not big burly blokes, but some nanas going, go home to your mother.
It might
Tidy
work.
yourself up. I'm not kidding. I think it's a seriously good idea. I mean, it's a no-brainer, surely, that they need some security on the trains to stop this happening. How is that hard? It's a threat to safety and property.
Your thoughts?
Agree.
The other interesting suggestion was air horns on the train, because it's very hard to tag a train extensively if there's a huge air horn blaring at you.
Water guns, those fancy water blastery guns, they'd be good, because you could knock the paint off as soon as it's put on.
That might be a health and safety issue.
Peter Fa'awhiu, Whawhatai. Michelle A. Court, lovely to see you.
Great to see you.
We're back tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.
Ko te maura e hoa mai he kōrero, kei te haere, he kaupapa, kei te karawhiua. Tonight on Checkpoint, the fiscal hole. How big is it? Who dug it? Labour by overpromising or National by underspending? The weather. Parts of the country are hit by tornadoes with heavy winds, rain, snow and thousands of lightning strikes, although Georgina from the Met Service has just said, no, it wasn't tornadoes, it was something else. Auckland is next, by the way. The Commonwealth Games, Hamish Bond, world champion rower, gets out of his boat onto a bike and wins bronze. And David Litti, who was so low profile as a weightlifter, he had to pay his own way to attend the World Champs, wins gold. I've just spoken to him. Grey Power argues for more access to cannabis for pain relief. I've just spoken to them. And Southlanders react to the closure of their museum and art gallery. Plus the pips.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina bat and aho. Homes have been destroyed, roofs have lifted off and thousands remain without power after a storm battered the country today. Taranaki was among the worst hit with 6,000 lightning strikes during 2 hours and a tornado causing widespread damage. The police say many farm buildings were destroyed and about a dozen houses lost their roofs after a tornado hit the town of Rahotu early this morning. Sergeant Andrew Russ says no injuries have been reported, but there is major damage.
Roofs completely ripped off houses, hay bunds that are just poles now. It's sort of like a kilometre wide sort of thing. You can see the damage if you get on top of the hills. Trees just completely snapped off part way up and barns just everywhere.
Sergeant Andrew Russ says emergency services are going door to door to check on locals. A tornado also ripped through the Ruapehu National Park village this morning, destroying an unoccupied house, lifting some roofs and cutting power. The Ruapehu District Council says 40 homes in the park are still without power and a police cordon will remain around the worst affected area overnight. Urban search and rescue teams have been assessing the damage to see if it's safe for people to go home. Sarah Crump was at work this morning and saw the tornado coming.
Looking out the window, I noticed a white wall of water coming off the roof, just a wall of water, trampoline hitting the building and roofing iron flying around with the howling winds. Just decided I'm going to hunker down and it was quite terrifying, for a couple of minutes I think it would have lasted.
Sarah Crump. Fire and Emergency has had about 40 weather-related call-outs in the wider Auckland area. A spokesperson says most are to do with fallen trees or downed power lines. Met Service says gusts of up to 120 kilometres an hour have been recorded at the Manukau Heads. It says a string of thunderstorms has now passed over Auckland, but more strong winds are expected later tonight. People living near the contaminated Ohakia Air Base are pushing for blood tests to be more easily available. Ohakia and Manawatu and other defence bases have contaminated the groundwater around them with toxic and long-lasting firefighting foam chemicals. A laboratory has so far tested the blood of 4 people. Manawatu District Mayor Helen Warboys says local people know that the blood tests are not definitive but want them anyway.
A doctor from the DHB visits them and takes them through and reminds them that currently there is no guidelines or modelling for what the results may show or what levels are acceptable. But from the residents' point of view, it's giving them a baseline that they have on their records for any future developments.
She says the ministry has been asked to ensure GPs in Rangatike as well as Manawatu have been alerted to the problem. Large areas of Auckland's Waitakere Ranges will be closed off to the public from next month. In February, the Council's Environment Committee proposed closing off more of the ranges as well as high-risk tracks in the Hunua Ranges in order to prevent the spread of Kauri dieback disease. Councillors have today voted in favour of more closures, meaning from next month all forested areas in the Waitakares will be shut to the public. Some upgraded tracks that pose little or no risk of spreading the disease will remain open. The committee chair, Waitakere Councillor Penny Hull, says it's important for the forest's future.
We've got Aucklanders who love the Waitakere Ranges and, they tramp and they run and they walk in this beautiful area. We've got businesses that operate out of the ranges, but we've also got a biosecurity issue. We've got Kauri dieback disease, and that's where our responsibility kicks in.
Penny Hull says she has faith Aucklanders will follow the decision. The Minister for Treaty Negotiations, Andrew Little, says the Crown has paid a fair price to buy out a water bottling company at Poroti Springs near Whangarei. The government has paid $7.5 million to the Auckland company Zodiac Holdings for their assets, including land, bores and water right consents. The company had planned to take water from the aquifer that feeds the Māori-owned springs and bottle it for export. Andrew Little says Poroti Hapu have endured years of frustration over the springs and the Zodiac property will be held for treaty settlements.
It's good as Treaty Minister to get this over the line and have it there. It gives a little bit of assurance to local iwi and hapu up there that this now is secured and available to them as part of any future treaty settlement, so they can be sure about that.
Andrew Little. Zodiac says it's always tried to accommodate the needs of the Poroti Kaitiaki, and the sale is a significant step towards resolving their grievance. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, the Olympic rowing champion Hamish Bond has won a bronze medal in the men's cycling time trial at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. Bond posted the fastest time but was then overhauled by Australian Cameron Meyer, who won gold by over half a minute, while England's Harry Tanfield was just 2 seconds quicker than Bond. Bond says he can't be disappointed about today's outcome, with the bronze medal finish finally cementing his position as a professional road cyclist.
Although I've come late to the sport, I bring some heavy, I guess, experience at high-performance sport, and I try and use that to my advantage. And yeah, I'm starting to feel more authentic, I guess, and it's just a slow process, but yeah, certainly feeling like a bike rider now as opposed to a rower on a bike.
Hamish Bond. Meanwhile, weightlifter Laurel Hubbard's injury to her elbow could be career-ending. The gold medal favourite badly hurt her elbow during her attempt to lift 132 kilos in the women's plus 90 kilogram final on the Gold Coast last night and had to withdraw from the competition. She says medical staff have told her the injury could spell the end of her professional weightlifting career. The New Zealand basketball star Steven Adams will feature in the NBA playoffs after his side, the Oklahoma City Thunder, beat the Miami Heat 115-93, securing a spot in the Western Conference top 8. That's the news.
Rescue helicopters in doubt.
The community are absolutely devastated because that helicopter makes us all feel safe because we are quite a fair way from any major hospital.
Protesting nurses.
They just want better pay because they feel that they just can't provide adequate care for their staff.
And a ship on fire.
There's a big pool of thick white smoke and quite high flames, and the crews are all still down there working very hard.
Working hard on the breaking stories. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, New Zealand Rugby's renewed push to tackle mental fitness after thousands go to its Head First website for support. And after 11, Waco survivor Aucklander Grace Adams on helping vulnerable young people guard against the allure of a cult. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and watches and warnings are in force for a significant winter storm. For all of the North Island, periods of rain or showers with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms. Snow lowering to 700 metres about and south of Taihape this evening. Possible damaging wind gusts until early morning. Rain turning to showers tomorrow, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Buller, Nelson and Marlborough inland from the Kaikoura Ranges. Showers with snow above 500 metres clearing this evening. Severe gale southeasterlies easing this afternoon. The coastal Marlborough and Canterbury, showers some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms and snow to about 500 metres. Severe gales about the Sounds until evening. Westland and Fiordland, fine and gale southeasterlies easing today, fine tomorrow. Southland and Otago, showers with hail and snow to 500 metres, gradually easing, then clearing later tomorrow. The Chatham Islands, periods of rain, heavy at times. It's just gone 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Welcome, everyone. Coming up on the program, did National underspend or Labour overpromise? And we're at the Commonwealth Games. But let's begin with that weather. A belter of an autumn storm on the 50th anniversary of the Wahine disaster. Auckland is in the firing line tonight as bad weather whipped through much of the country today, bringing heavy winds, rain, snow and things being described as tornadoes. We'll check to see if that's correct. The Met Service recorded more than 6,000 lightning strikes across the Taranaki region in just 2 hours. This morning in the tiny coastal settlement of Rahotu, residents are counting themselves lucky after winds tore roof after roof from homes, destroyed farm buildings, ripped out power lines and even lifted cattle into the air. More bad weather is on the way. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin begins our coverage about 40 km southwest of New Plymouth.
Jasmine Kerr lives on the main road at Rahotu with her 2 children. She says a thunderstorm lit up the early morning sky and the first sign of how bad things would get was when their home lost power.
So this morning there was a pretty awesome electrical storm from about 5 and it just never let up. And then 6:30 this morning, me and the kids got up and we were having breakfast and it just looked like a rain front coming through and then it twisted and we just ran to our safe space in the house. But yeah, we lost our roof.
But Ms Kerr says they got off lightly as some homes have been completely destroyed. Janine Luke Tamaru and her son CJ live on State Highway 45 on the outskirts of the village. And theirs was one of the homes that took the brunt of the wind.
The power went out and then huge lightning bolts all around, and then just felt like it was an earthquake. Tornadoes just lifted completely the whole of our roof. Just was really fast and very scary, and has left our home without a roof.
Ms Luke Tamaru says she feared for their safety.
We didn't know whether it was an earthquake or a tornado or a storm or what it was. We just stood under the door frame and just held on to each other until it passed, whatever, how long it took.
Were you afraid?
Yeah, definitely afraid. Definitely scary experience.
Ms Luke Tamaru and her son got out unscathed, but the same could not be said for farmer Geordie Mullen's staff house on Kahui Road.
This is just one of the supplement houses that we have for our staff. Luckily no one was in here. We're supposed to have a guy moving in here in about 3 weeks' time, so pretty lucky we've got another spare house down the road. But yeah, demoed.
Mr Mullen says he and a mate were milking when the tornado passed overhead.
I was milking and yeah, a tornado just came straight over top of our cow shed and then ripped over all of the houses and all the barns, starting from the bottom of the farm and worked the way right up through the middle.
So how was it for you where you were?
Oh, we were stuck in the vat room, so all the windows and everything imploded and sucked in on us. So it was just me and Jake Corrington just hanging on for dear life.
Mr Mullen says there's weeks of work ahead to clear up the mess. Incident Controller Sergeant Andrew Russ says the damage is widespread.
Cut a swathe up through Rahutu here, Kahui Road right up through the farmland and that, so we've had quite a few houses had their roofs ripped off, quite a few hay barns, farm buildings and that been destroyed, power poles, power lines down, so we're just trying to work through at the moment. We're going door to door just to check on people to make sure they're okay.
Sergeant Russ says it appears no one has been injured in the storm. He says a welfare centre has been set up at Rahutu School and about 7 families have had to be relocated. Sergeant Russ says the focus is now on preparing for strong winds expected tonight.
Obviously the tornado was that caused all the damage, but now it's caused the damage. You've got a lot of iron on that line around, houses exposed, so then you get that southerly coming through and it can cause more damage, so we're trying to get the farmers to clean up the iron, that sort of thing, and secure that so it doesn't become a missile.
Students throughout Taranaki were sent home early this afternoon ahead of the southerly, while Lines Company Powerco says more than 3,000 properties are still without electricity, down from about 12,000 this morning. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Robin Martin ahau.
And we'll talk to the Met Service later about what's ahead, particularly in the north of the north. But a tornado, or what's being described as a tornado, ripped through the central North Island town of National Park today, destroying at least one house and damaging others. It tore along a narrow corridor to the north of the township for a minute or two. Our reporter Andrew McRae is there. He's on the corner of Carroll Street where the road is closed. It looks rather wonderfully calm. In fact, it looks dead still behind you now, Andrew. But what happened earlier today?
Well, it was around about 9:15, John, when the heavens opened, and then, as people have described it to me, a loud noise sort of came through, and the tornado cut a swathe through the northern part of the town, starting and sort of coming from the northwest and cutting right across. So behind me is one of the blocks that is closed, and right down Carroll Street, there are about 5 blocks right back to the main road. And as you can people watching this can see the house behind me is one of the ones that is fairly badly damaged, and it's not looking promising for the owners of that particular property.
No, it's not at all. We can see the roof is off, and in fact it's badly exposed to the elements now, and people can either hear or see that it is starting to rain. Actually, Andrew, it looks thoroughly unpleasant, and we're very grateful for you standing there. Yeah, I can imagine. So what are people going to do tonight if they can't go home? Because obviously there are evacuations in this community. Where are they all?
Well, there's around about, in these 5 blocks, about 40 homes affected, and they range from really badly damaged, one totally destroyed, through to just reasonably minor structural damage. But no one's allowed back into their homes tonight. Most people, I've been told, or they can go to the Civil Defence Welfare Centre, but most people are going to stay the night with family and friends. And the council is basically in the next hour or so assessing all the houses just to see whether people can return in the morning. But at this stage it's going to be dark shortly, so this entire end of town is cordoned off, and there are roadblocks at each street leading into this Carroll Street.
Right, I'm just looking at the pictures we're overlaying as you speak, and there's been a lot of damage. There is a sense now that the worst of it is over. I mean, it's unpleasant there now, but the really wild weather has gone, Andrew?
Pretty much, John, yes. It was really wild this morning with the tornado and strong winds, but most of the afternoon it's been reasonably fine. When I arrived here it was reasonably fine, though cold, but it's just in the last half hour or so that it's clouded over, starting to get dark, and the wind's picked up, bitterly cold as I said, and it's starting to rain, so fairly unpleasant. People were expecting a storm, there's no question of that, but no one in this town was expecting a tornado to cut a swathe through 40 homes.
Incredible, and you can see real damage in the pictures. Andrew McRae joining us in the centre of the North Island. Let's head south to Wellington and the South Island, which have also been hard hit by really wild autumnal weather. Snow was a welcome surprise to some people in the South Island's alpine areas, but parts of the west coast have been hard hit by strong winds, causing some roofs to lift and caravans to topple. The weather has also caused most of today's Cook Strait ferry crossings to be cancelled on the anniversary of the Wahine storm. Logan Church has the latest.
This morning, residents and tourists in the South Island's alpine passes and high country awoke to a winter wonderland. Arthur's Pass Alpine Motel owner, Peter Neal, says it's very rare to see so much snow in April, and it came as a shock to some tourists.
We had a few Australian families staying overnight, and so they've woken up to a nice little sprinkling of snow, which some of them have never seen before. So yeah, they were pretty stoked about that. This time of year is very unusual. Yeah. There's a saying that the ski fields have that snow in May doesn't stay, but I mean we're still in April, I think, aren't we? So it's way too early for snow. It's very unusual.
But it's a different story on the South Island's west coast, with high winds causing havoc for motorists and residents alike. The police say 3 camper vans and 1 caravan toppled due to the winds. Trees also closed parts of State Highway 6, and downed power lines caused outages that affected about 315 households in Little Wanganui and Karamea this afternoon. Fire and Emergency Shift Manager, Brent Dunn, says crews have responded to about a dozen weather-related calls on the west coast so far today. Mr Dunn says this has ranged from loose roofs in the Westport area, as well as dealing with flying trampolines.
We don't want people going out there and putting themselves in danger, if there is a situation like with roofing on flapping around. But it's always a good idea when there is a severe weather event that's coming in or high winds forecast for people to secure things like trampolines.
Meanwhile, in Wellington, all passenger sailings across the Cook Strait except one have been cancelled. The weather is expected to get better tomorrow, although Met Service is warning that more strong winds are expected before then. For Checkpoint, Logan Church.
Yes, we will get the latest from the Met Service a bit later in the program, but let's go to the Commonwealth Games now, where it was a pretty wonderful Monday for our athletes after 4 gold and 2 silver medals were won last night in squash, weightlifting, swimming, shot put and javelin. Hamish Bond did his bit today, adding a cycling bronze to the team's medal haul in the individual time trial this afternoon. Remember, the champion Olympic rower only turned his hand to cycling after Rio. New Zealand now sits 4th on the medal table behind Australia, England and India. Megan Whelan has more from the aptly named Gold Coast.
The Olympic rowing champion Hamish Bond is now a Commonwealth Games bronze medalist in the men's time trial. Bond says it was one of his best executed races.
I was pleased when I got off the bike. I felt as though there wasn't too much more I could have done. Inevitably, my personality and you start seeing the other riders come in and some small margins like 2 seconds to silver, and you start thinking about, could have done this, could have done that, but no, really pleased to come away with a medal.
After smashing the Commonwealth Games record in qualifying, Tom Walsh took the gold in shot put, throwing 21.41. He was a little disappointed not to throw further, but says the medal was the important thing.
I thought tonight might be the night, but I was trying too hard. So, and I know when I push like that, it's not going to happen, and I need to get away from that. and I know exactly what I need to do too.
Walsh's gold was the second silver medal for the New Zealand track and field team last night after para-athlete Holly Robinson won silver in the women's javelin with a personal best throw of 43.32 metres. She was beaten by her arch rival Paralympic champion Holly Arnold of Wales, who broke her own world record with a throw of 44.43 metres. Holly Robinson says the other Holly brings out the best in her.
My goals coming out there tonight was to throw a PB and to medal, and I got both of those, and I threw a world record in the process as well, even though it was broken by Holly after that as well, but that's incredible. I'm really happy with how tonight's gone.
Sophie Pascoe made it double gold, adding victory in the SB9 100 metres breaststroke to the SM10 200 metre individual medley title she won over the weekend. When she looked back at her race, there are definitely things to work on in the next 2 years leading up to the Tokyo Olympics, but for now she's savouring the moment.
Really looking forward to obviously being going around and supporting the rest of our teammates. I've never been in this position before, that I've actually finished early, and now I can actually stay around and watch the rest of our teammates succeed and be proud representatives for New Zealand.
Joelle King became the first New Zealander to win Commonwealth gold in singles, and she adds to her gold and silver in doubles. She had whānau in the crowd that she hasn't seen for years.
To be honest, I had to really try and not think about everyone in the crowd. It's on an occasion like that, it's quite easy to get overwhelmed with the whole situation, but definitely when the times were tough and I could hear them calling out for me, and it just gives you that little bit of spark that you need at the crucial times. So yeah, I was pretty thankful they were out there.
Joelle King is back on court today and has 2 games, one in women's doubles and her mixed doubles with men's silver medalist Paul Cole. On the Gold Coast, Megan Whelan.
Yes, the Commonwealth Games have contained some remarkable stories. Megan mentioned some of them. Sophie Pascoe, Hamish Bond. There was Joe Edwards, of course, Tom Walsh, Joelle King, Eddie Dawkins winning gold, silver and bronze. But the story of David Litty, we think, is hard to beat. At 21, he won gold by lifting 403 kilos, 174 in the snatch, 229 kilos in the clean and jerk, which is the weight of Kieran Reid, Jerome Kano and 18 blocks of butter combined. It's an all-time Commonwealth record, and he's only just begun doing international competitions at a senior level. I spoke to him a short time ago, and unsurprisingly, he was still feeling pretty stoked.
Pretty proud. I never really thought I could pull it off myself, and it's unreal, and I can't really explain how to feel. And even today when I woke up, I was like, man, am I dreaming, or is this for real?
It is for real. It's real gold that you are wearing. Can you talk about the lift? Tell us about the lift. From our friends at TVNZ, we have the footage, the 229. And at what stage did you know you had this?
As soon as I got it off the ground and I racked it and I stood up, I had a good hand grip, so I knew I had it. The only thing was I doubted my legs and the power that would come through from the bottom. And as soon as I locked out and stood up, I was so happy, and I can't actually believe that I actually got it. And at the moment, I was just so proud and happy to be able to represent New Zealand and the family, and yeah.
You held the New Zealand on your shirt. You held it for a long time, didn't you? You held it out to the crowd. That was a moment of great pride, and the crowd was making a huge amount of noise.
I wanted them to know that New Zealand was in the house. And that they were not a little island in Australia. We're a little island out of Australia that will take over soon somehow.
New Zealand is in the house, and Tonga to a certain extent too, because you spent a lot of your childhood in Tonga, didn't you?
Yeah, I was New Zealand born, Tongan raised, and I came back to New Zealand when I was 10 years old, and I've been there since, so yeah.
And there you were at One Tree Hill College, year 10, I think. Classic Kiwi kid, not really sure what you wanted to do. And someone said to the woman who became your coach and mentor, Tina, this kid's got what it takes as a lifter. Is that what happened?
Yeah, as a kid, interested to do whatever. Just followed some of my friends to weightlifting. Started doing it, didn't really like it. It wasn't as fun as rugby, so I went back to rugby. And I had a talk with my coach one day, and she just basically said, do you want to be just another number in the field or a world-class lifter? And that kind of hit me hard, and that's the, I guess, the point. I decided that I want to be a world-class lifter.
And you are one. You're number one in the Commonwealth. You have a Commonwealth record. You already have a world ranking, but you know, and I think everyone knows, that this is kind of the beginning of something even more extraordinary for you, right? What are you thinking about the Olympics in 2020?
There's a lot more to come, and 2020 Japan will be fun. The goal is to at least medal, but if I can do my best and have fun with that competition too, I'll be glad with whatever I come out with.
And you haven't had much money. You had to have a give a little to get you to the world champs, right? So now that you've won gold, you'll get some financial backing, which will make a hell of a difference, won't it?
Yeah, the whole weightlifting side of financial and stuff is not that great. But every trip has been, 90% of the trips has been self-funded, and I'm thankful for my coach for supporting me and backing me and doing everything for me to be able to get me out there and do what I'm good at.
So this, and you are good at it, and that's the point, isn't it? So this is absolutely going to change your life, won't it?
Yeah, it already has. So that's the good thing about it. I feel blessed and I'm grateful for everything.
Can you tell me how it has already? What feels different today from, say, 2 or 3 days ago?
Everything's different right now. I'm not used to being in the camera every 5 seconds and getting messages from everybody. It's just overwhelming and it's unreal, and I'm just trying to keep out of social media so I can focus on my day and live it out instead of spending it on my phone and stuff like that.
Well, it's been our privilege to talk to you, David. Congratulations, and you are a very young man with very limited experience in international competitions, so it really does seem like this is the beginning of a remarkable ride for you, and we really wish you well, and congratulations.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the love and support. Thank you, New Zealand. And I can't believe I'm actually talking to you.
Me too, bro. Me too. David Litty joining us a short time ago from the Gold Coast. Right, let's change the subject entirely with the time almost at 27 minutes past 5. During the election campaign, it was all about the so-called fiscal hole. Now the focus is on whether National has left a hole by not investing enough in hospitals, schools and so on during its 9 years in power. The government says health and education have fallen prey to massive underspending and is moving to dampen spending expectations ahead of next month's budget. That's going to be big, that budget. But National has hit back, saying Labor is in crisis because it overpromised during the election campaign. So, is there a hole, and if so, who had the spade? Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
The Health Minister, David Clark, says the sector has been seriously underfunded, and the shoddy state of the Middlemore Hospital buildings are just one example of that. Dr Clark has asked for an asset register to be put together so he knows what needs to be replaced.
The best estimate we have, and it is a ropey number, is that over the next 10 years about $14 billion will need to be spent in terms of capital in the health sector. That's why I've asked for the work to be done so that we do have a proper plan for those assets, because until we have better numbers there'll be a certain amount of uncertainty around it.
David Clark says district health boards are running a combined deficit of nearly $190 million in the 8 months to the end of February, and that's forecast to hit $209 million by the end of the financial year. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says there's a variety of challenges in his portfolio as well, and is also pointing the finger at the previous government.
I don't think the previous government did a good job of ensuring that education system as a whole was funded for population growth, and that's in everything from early childhood education through to schooling through to tertiary education.
Mr Hipkins says at least a couple of $100 million worth of school buildings are not fit for purpose.
Basically at the very bottom end of the ranking, in terms of whether they're usable. Some of them aren't even usable. The question there is some of those buildings are in schools where there's extra capacity, so they may just be demolished and not replaced.
Nationals leader Simon Bridges says it's clear the government's incredibly worried about delivering on the high expectations it raised going into the election.
This is why they've gone into crisis management here with these sort of things to try and reset. This is why they're doing the spin. Now, this is why actually you've got a Prime Minister who said she'd be better than playing politics, but now is looking to drip feed examples. I mean, it seems to me effectively what you're going to have is officialdom out there in our schools and our hospitals looking for doors that don't shut properly. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Independent economist Shamabeel Jacob says there was huge underspending in the past 5 years, but it was deliberate.
Because the focus was very much on getting back to surplus. And there was a belief that smaller government would lead to better outcomes. Now with Middlemore and other things, we can see that's not the case. And whether it's housing, health, social services, each of those areas will find quite a bit of underspend.
Before the election, Labor set itself a series of budget responsibility rules, including that it would reduce net debt to 20% of GDP within 5 years. Shamabeel Jacob says the government has tied itself up in knots with those rules.
The reality is that the promises they have made require much greater resources than they can manage with paying down debt and getting back to surplus. It's simply not going to work. They're going to have to find some alternative to either reduce their promises or to bite the bullet and borrow more money and spend.
The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, is sticking to his guns though, insisting the government can make the investments it needs to within its budget responsibility rules. The coalition government's first budget will be unveiled on Thursday, May the 17th. Atu I te whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei ko Chris Bramalaho.
And obviously we'll cover that budget like a duvet in Ophir. Coming up, remember the Wahine disaster? We are going to. 50 years on. Grey Power argues for more access to cannabis for pain relief, and Invercargill locals are concerned about the future of the Southern Museum's 100 tuatara after announcement yesterday that the museum is going to close. We'd love your feedback. You can text us 2101. We are, of course, on Twitter and Facebook and every multimedia platform you care to name. And our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Business next. But before it all, not too late tonight, Katrina Batten
pretty good.
with the headlines.
I'm still reeling over the duvet over an Ophir comment, but there you go. More than 1,000 people in coastal Taranaki will be without power overnight after widespread damage to power poles and lines from today's storm. The region has been battered by tornadoes, lightning and heavy rain, and winds, and Powerco is bracing for more high winds tonight. The Ruapehu District Council says 40 homes remain without power after a tornado whipped through National Park Village this morning. Parts of Whanganui, Manawatu, Waikato, Tauranga and Coromandel have had disruptions to their power supply. A Powerco spokesperson says they hope to reduce the 3,000 without power this afternoon down to about 1,300 tonight. And at least 9 schools in the area closed for the day due to the weather, and several flights in and out of New Plymouth were cancelled. All passenger ferry crossings across Cook Strait have been cancelled, and tomorrow's sailings will be reviewed this evening. It comes as people in Wellington commemorate 50 years since the sinking of the Wahine Inter-Island ferry with the loss of 53 lives. People living near the Ohakia Air Base want easier access to blood tests to find out if they've been affected by groundwater contaminated with toxic firefighting foam chemicals. A laboratory has so far tested the blood of 4 people in the area. Large parts of the Waitakere Ranges will be closed to the public in an effort to stop the spread of Cody dieback disease. From next month, all forested areas in the Waitakares will be shut to the public. The Minister for Treaty Negotiations says 4 hectares of land near the controversial water bottling plant in Northland will be kept for future treaty settlement. The plant at Poroti Springs, which was owned by Zodiac Holdings, which planned to take water from the aquifer that feeds the Māori-owned springs and bottle it for export. The Crown has paid the Auckland company $7.5 million for the land, bores and water right consents. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Which is about 27 minutes away. Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's go to business news now with Emile Donovan beaming in from Wellington. Hi, Emile. A bleak outlook to the economy from some businesses. Can you explain this?
Yeah, that's right, John. So this comes from the Institute of Economic Research. It's their quarterly survey of business opinion. Now, it's showing a net 9% of businesses reckon the economy is going to get worse over the coming months. That's actually marginally better than it was at the end of last year, when that figure was at net 11%. But despite those sort of stratus clouds preparing to come along and dump a whole lot of rain on the economy, at least that's the perception, businesses are feeling pretty sunny about their own prospects. A net 15% improved their increased their takes over the past quarter, and some reckon things will be improving again over the coming 3 months. However, firms are expecting profits to fall, and a tight labour market means that they're having trouble finding the right staff, and they're expecting to hire fewer people.
Right. This is all sort of sounding vaguely familiar, Emil, isn't it? I'm suffering from it. What was it Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again?
Deja vu, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So we actually were hearing some of this stuff a couple of weeks ago, but those surveys of business opinion, they were coming from individual banks. This is coming from the Institute of Economic Research, as a long-standing survey of opinion. So this is really the gold standard, the sort of the godfather of business opinion. That being said, it does echo the same stuff that we were hearing from the banks, firms reckoning they'll be fine, but the economy as a whole might struggle in the short term.
Yeah, that's an interestingly mixed message, isn't it? Thanks, Emil. What happened on the markets today?
The NZX 50 is up the faintest of touches, 16 points, that's 0.18%. It closed on 8469. And the Kiwi dollar was steady. It's buying 73.3 US cents, 94.8 Australian and 51.8 pence.
Thank you very much, Emil Donovan out of Wellington with today's business news. We're going to talk to Georgina Griffiths from the Met Service about what the weather is going to do tonight, particularly in the north, a bit later on in the program. But let's go for a national forecast, first of all, to Met Service meteorologist John Law. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora. Definitely worth keeping a close eye on those severe weather watches and warnings as we go through the rest of this evening. Some stronger winds back with us in the far north, and we have got more wet weather, more windy weather and more cold weather as well. By the time we head through in towards Wednesday, we'll find we're still stuck in a southwesterly across much of the country, bringing more showers in across Auckland and Northland, and feeling cold as well. 14 degrees Celsius, our top temperature for the likes of Auckland, and not much better elsewhere as well. We've got a fair bit of wet weather to start the day. That'll pull away towards the east as we go through the daytime, but leaving a rather cold and showery setup across the North Island. And still more showers to come down in towards Wellington and the Wairarapa. And some of those could be fairly heavy, perhaps even with some hail as well. Temperature-wise, 11 degrees Celsius for Wellington. And with that strong southerly, it will feel colder as well. And that strong southerly is going to be right up the eastern coast, bringing more showers through the Wairarapa up towards Hawke's Bay and Gisborne as we go through the daytime. Perhaps some heavy and thundery. And we've got more showers to start the day for the eastern coast of the South Island as well. Rather a cloudy, wet start, perhaps even a bit of snowfall still about the tops of Banks Peninsula, and feeling cold too. Temperatures in Christchurch struggling into double figures. And we are going to find that cold air extends right the way across the South Island. Although the best of the weather will be in places like Nelson and Greymouth out on that western coast, we will find there's plenty of cold weather in store, particularly down through Southland and Otago. Temperatures starting off about -1 in Queenstown and highs of just 9 degrees Celsius. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Wellington turned on sombre weather today. Appropriately so, it was a sombre occasion. It's 50 years since the sinking of the Wahine, New Zealand's worst modern maritime disaster. 51 people lost their lives that day, another died several weeks later, and a 53rd victim later still. Today, survivors, family members and rescuers brave stormy weather in the capital to remember the dead and acknowledge those who risked their own lives to come to their aid on that dreadful day. Charlie Drever filed this report.
More than 500 people attended a dawn service at Muritai School in the suburb of Eastbourne, where many of the bodies were washed up 50 years ago. One of the Wahine passengers, Nusara Asuku, travelled from Thailand to attend the commemoration. She says the long journey was worth it, as she was able to finally meet the man who pulled her from the water all those years ago, fellow passenger Robert Ewan.
It was big events in our family. 6 of us were there together and all of us survived. It's big things that happened to me, even though I was small. I remember what happened. If Rob had not helped me from the water, I could have died.
Tony Cord was 15 at the time of the sinking and lived in Seatoon. He went out in a tiny boat to help rescue survivors. Today, he took dozens of Otaki College students out into Wellington Harbour for the steam-passed flotilla.
I was terrified, absolutely terrified, and there's a photo of me at Seatoon Wharf, and I was showing these Otaki students the fact that I could remember the trawl, a bag of it on the wharf, but I couldn't remember the Wahine lifeboat, Kokaroo the launch, in the photo I didn't see that, and I didn't see people in stretchers. I just corralled everything in. I just focused on surviving on the day. So I don't know what I did on the day, and I don't want to know.
To break up the sound of the rain and wind, a young bagpipe player braved the cold to play the boats back to shore. The conditions were less than ideal. All passenger ferry crossings across the Cook Strait were cancelled today. In fact, 20 boats couldn't attend today's event. However, organiser Lewis Robinson says 30 vessels still went out to show their respects.
I think the police commissioner probably had the worst place. He was down on the stringer without much shelter and no brolly, so he did his duty very well.
A much warmer event was held at the TSB Auditorium on the capital's waterfront. Among the attendees was Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who said the tragedy had a significant impact on New Zealand.
My father-in-law recalled his own story as a university student due to travel to Wellington for Easter tournament, who was on the sailing that followed the wahine, and his vivid memories of seeing it. My mother recalls being on a bus as she heard the news and knowing that a schoolgirl friend was on that sailing that day. Everyone has a story.
Presbyterian Minister Barry Doig attended the midday service. His parents were on the wahine.
My mother, too frightened to jump into the sea, was picked up by a crewman and was tossed into the harbour. She was found unconscious on the beach at Eastbourne, taken to the hospital, and she survived. My father, Cecil's body, was one of the 4 whose bodies were found at Seatoon.
While many faces were wet with raindrops, others were wet with tears, showing the memory of that terrible day in 1968 is very much still in the minds and hearts of New Zealanders. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, I'm Charlie Drever.
It's 90 minutes to 6. Thank you for that package, Charlie. In breaking news, New Zealand cyclist Linda Willemsen has won silver in the time trial. Boy, that is an ordeal, that event. There are some steep hills. So Linda Willemsen just won silver in the time trial. New Zealand cyclists having a fantastic Commonwealth Games. We'll have more on that as we get the details. Reports are emerging out of Australia that China wants to build a military base in Vanuatu. The Sydney Morning Herald reports the prospect of a Chinese military outpost so close to Australia has been discussed at the highest levels in Canberra, Washington and beyond. We suspect New Zealand politicians are reacting cautiously to the news, with the government saying in principle it's strongly opposed to the militarisation of the Pacific. Here's our political reporter, Benedict Collins.
Vanuatu is one of the few countries that has supported Beijing's controversial island-building program in the South China Sea. The president of the Pacific Forum's Centre for Strategic and International Studies, Ralph Cossa, says the proposal for a base in Vanuatu is the latest in China's campaign to counter American influence in the region.
It's probably more psychological than it is strategic. If there was ever a conflict in the area, I would certainly not want to be living on a Chinese base in Vanuatu. But during peacetime, it just sort of increases the Chinese shadow into that area.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says New Zealand keeps a very close eye on what happens in the Pacific.
Ultimately, these are discussions between 2 sovereign nations, but I'm very openly expressing now, and would do so to any others, privately and publicly, that we take a strong position in the Pacific against militarisation.
Vanuatu's Foreign Minister, Ralph Regenvanu, has vehemently denied his government is talking to China about a military base. He says he's unhappy with Fairfax Media for publishing what he says are false claims. New Zealand's Foreign Minister, Winston Peters, says he'll wait for confirmation it's a credible proposal before making specific comment.
We don't know where this is going to go because the Vanuatuans say they know nothing about it. So at this point it may be hypothetical. If you follow what the Vanuatuan government say, then there's nothing in the story. But then others are saying, in Australia as well, that there is substance to it. So there's nothing actually new in this, in that context.
How concerned would you be if China was trying to build a military base?
Look, we'll deal with that when we have got something tangible to deal with.
Nationals leader Simon Bridges says he'd want to see more details before taking a firm position.
To see infrastructural investment by other countries through a variety of investment vehicles is not uncommon. That's not necessarily wrong. But I think when you're talking military and these sort of things, you'd want to think it through pretty carefully.
Nationals Foreign Affairs spokesperson Todd McClay also had a cautious response.
Vanuatu is a country that New Zealand has a strong relationship. I'm sure the government will want to talk to them about their views about this before anything goes ahead. But any form of militarisation within the Pacific would be viewed dimly, I'm sure.
The Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop says she's been assured by Vanuatu officials that there is no formal proposal from Beijing, but she stopped short of addressing whether there had been any unofficial talks. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
The Misuse of Drugs Medicinal Cannabis Amendment Bill is before the Health Select Committee at present, whose members are considering amending the Misuse of Drugs Act to improve access to medicinal cannabis for New Zealanders who are suffering from terminal illness. The bill passed its first reading at the end of January, of course, and the Health Select Committee is now hearing submissions on its scope and its future. Among those making submissions in favour of the bill getting more teeth and making cannabis more readily available is Beverly Aldridge from a Grey Power branch in Whanganui. She's appearing before the committee tomorrow morning, and I spoke to her earlier as she and her husband were travelling to Wellington.
I represent Aotearoa Grey Power and actually the silenced majority, because we have had a lot of support from the elderly around the country to be denied the ability to grow our own cannabis, and when we have so many people in the older age group who are suffering from various ailments and from horrific pain, to us is elderly abuse, and it's a basic breach of our human rights to be able to grow a plant.
So you want the right to grow cannabis for yourself, and pain relief is the argument you're making. And I wonder, of the people who are contacting you seeking to use cannabis as a form of mitigation, what afflictions are the ones they most often cite as the reason for wanting to use cannabis?
Okay, well, there are lots of us who are now suffering from glaucoma, people who have strokes in their family know that if they take cannabis, according to the studies, it activates straight away in the brain and it lessens the effects of the stroke so that they can be okay. But if they actually have it beforehand with a history of it, they will possibly never ever have a stroke. Now, there are lots of people also who are suffering from pains. They have arthritic pains, broken back pains that the back isn't healing in their older ages.
Beverly, sorry, is this you? I mean, I know you are a representative of Grey Power, and clearly that's why you're going to be before the committee tomorrow, but are you also talking from personal experience here? Is pain an issue in your life?
I suffer from glaucoma. I suffer from colitis, which can be healed. I've been told that the medical profession can do nothing for me and that I have to learn to manage it. My husband has a broken back and it's developed osteoporosis at that break, and he suffers extreme pain. He's also had a minor heart attack, and when he went into hospital he came out with 18 types of medications which almost killed him. He's been left with what they call an insult to his kidneys, which are now hardly functioning. So personally, we have a need for being able to grow cannabis. It's not fair that he has to suffer that pain and he can't take the painkillers for it because they've damaged his body so much with the other medications that they gave him. Actually, 60%, according to Dr. Falkoff, he says that 60% of the people who have cancer are using cannabis.
And do you know of people who are using cannabis in those circumstances?
Well, yes, I do.
And how are they getting it? Where are they getting it from?
They don't tell me where they get it from, but I do know that the gangs are heavily involved in supplying cannabis to children at school gates and things like that. We elderly don't want to be involved in that. We actually want to be able to grow our own and not have to mix in those circles.
So, Beverly, what are you after? You are after the right, essentially, to grow your own cannabis for your own use.
Yes, exactly that. Although CBD is excellent, it's good, it has to be combined with the THC because the two components, as well as all the rest of the plants, they work synergistically together. So if you just have the CBD, it will only be effective for those for whom CBD only will be effective. But THC and all of the other 500 odd components are really necessary. And what we really want to do is to be able to have access to the cannabis plant that is grown organically under the sun and the elements. So therefore the plant is exposed to the various rays, all of the rays of the sun. We don't want synthetic cannabis. We don't want cannabis that has been grown in hothouses. We don't want it when it has been implanted with the suicide gene or when it has been subjected to insecticides, because that defeats the purpose of trying to get healthy.
So the Otamatea chapter of Grey Power is making quite a radical submission, Beverly, relatively speaking, and that is for the simple right to use cannabis and to grow it for yourselves. What kind of hearing do you expect?
When we presented our petition to the Justice and Electoral Committee, they were very interested in what we had to say. So I'm hoping that we will get be treated with dignity as we were then, and that we will be listened to, and that hopefully they will understand how important it is that we are able to grow our own cannabis plants.
Beverly Aldridge, who is from Otamatea in the north, of course, not Whanganui. That was my fault, and I apologise to all concerned. She's making her submission to the Select Committee tomorrow morning. Let's stay in the north. The Māori Gardens of Poroti Springs near Whangarei are celebrating tonight. After years of fighting for some control of the aquifer that feeds their springs, they're applauding the government buyout of Zodiac Holdings, the water bottling company over the road. Here's Lois Williams.
The government announced this afternoon it's paid $7.5 million to buy up Zodiac's property at Poroti. The package includes 4 hectares of land, the bore sites and the company's 35-year consents to take water from the Wharatiri aquifer. The Minister for Treaty Negotiations, Andrew Little, says the assets will all be held for future treaty settlements.
It's good as Treaty Minister to get this over the line and have it there. It gives us a little bit of assurance to local iwi and hapu up there that this now is secured and available to them as part of any future treaty settlement, so they can be sure about that.
The Wharatiri Māori trustees who own the springs on behalf of local hapu are over the moon. The Poroti Springs Treaty claims considered the leading claim over Māori interests in fresh water. The chair of the trustees, Meryl Carter, says it's almost unbelievable that the long battle for real kaitiakitanga has been won.
I'm pretty excited, just pretty excited. As you know, our battle's been long and hard, and especially, to protect the springs. And so to have Zodiac moved out and no longer have the fear of, water being taken out, shipped out and sent overseas, etc., it's really awesome.
Zodiac says it's always tried to accommodate the concerns of the Poroti Guardians. It says the deal is a significant step forward in resolving their grievance, and the land and consents package could provide them with economic opportunity. But the hapu spokesman, Milan Ruka, says the trustees have no intention of using Zodiac's bores.
We never had any intent to draw any water ourselves from the bore site. We want to see that decommissioned, terminated,
As recently as March, Zodiac said it was planning to truck water from Poroti to a bottling factory at Marsden Point. But it says several factors affected its decision to exit the business. They include potential changes to the Overseas Investment Act, government plans to tax water bottlers, and the growing risk of trade wars in target markets like China. Andrew Little says talks between the government and Zodiac started 3 years ago under the former Minister of Treaty Negotiations, Chris Finlayson. He says the government's offer of $7.5 million was made after thorough valuation work before his time, but he felt it was a fair one.
I thought the price was, given the advice, it was the right thing. I mean, there clearly were attempts by the vendor in the last few months to hike that price even further. We refused to pay any more. We've now got an agreement that the land is now in Crown ownership. It's in the land bank. And look, we'll deal with it as we get through the treaty settlements for that area in the next wee while.
Milan Ruka says Hapu had no idea until very recently that the government was looking to buy Zodiac out, but he's a happy man today. He says Zodiac should be too.
But we can't, waste our thoughts on, how well they've done out of it. We've got to consider that this government has alleviated the problem of having Zodiac across the road, 90 metres across the road, taking our water.
Milan Ruka says Poroti water should be used firstly to keep the springs healthy and secondly for the whangare community. He says the Māori trustees will in future be seeking a water rights sharing agreement with the council and local irrigators. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
Gosh, we're getting about the country tonight. Let's head from one end to the other. Southlanders are in mourning after the shock news that the Southland Museum and Art Gallery will close indefinitely on Thursday due to earthquake risk. The sudden nature of the closure has shocked Invercargill residents and raised questions about the future of arts and culture in the region. Locals are also concerned about the future of the museum's tuatarium, which houses more than 100 tuatara. Some very famous residents. Timothy Brown filed this report from Invercargill.
The Southland Museum and Art Gallery has been a drawcard for the region's children for years. But in 2 days' time, it will fall silent.
Got very mixed emotions. Yes, we do have to keep the staff safe, but it's a precipitate notice. Suddenly it's going to be shut up that I think it's given everyone such a shock.
That's Friends of the Southland Museum and Art Gallery committee member Chris Henderson. Like many in the region, she is in disbelief at the sudden announcement of the museum's closure. But Chris Henderson says the future of the facility is now more important.
I think although it's shocking, it's also a golden opportunity to really look at what we want for the future.
So you're looking ahead rather than back now?
Oh, well, I don't look back. I feel so privileged to have seen the museum from its 1940s building right through to today and get to know the people who are part of it.
But many in Invercargill aren't as ready to move on yet. In fact, they told Checkpoint, walking through the building today feels like some sort of funeral mass.
I'm in shock. I'm in mourning. I'm a bit devastated this is happening. I can't quite believe that we've had so many years in Invercargill of knowing the state of the building, of knowing the earthquake risk, that something hasn't been resolved a lot earlier.
I'm absolutely devastated. I'm stunned. I've got an art exhibition happening here at the moment myself, and it'll be closed down on Friday. It did have 4 more weeks to go. It's all over.
I feel incredibly sad. I think it's been an iconic part of Invercargill, and to see it happen just like this, with absolutely no warning, is completely shocking and really sad.
Locals worry about what the closure means for the facility's 41 staff, the region's visitors, and the more than 100 permanent residents in the tuatarium. But there is one silver lining. The tuatara are not going anywhere, according to the museum's manager, Paul Horner.
When we close the museum, the tuatara will just stay in the enclosure here where they are on the north side of the building. Because it's glazed on the north wall, people will be able to see from outside, so they'll still be able to see the tuatara, but the tuatara will just stay here in the museum for the foreseeable future.
Paul Horner says a museum staff member will enter the facility to feed and care for the tuatara throughout the closure. He says yesterday's announcement provides further impetus for the need to support plans for a new facility contained in the Council's draft long-term plan, which is out for consultation at present.
That's a plan that we call the Living Dinosaurs, and it's to build a new enclosure on the west side of the present building, and it'll have a corridor leading to it from the foyer of the museum. So we could carry on with that plan and build the Living Dinosaurs enclosure. Then after that'll be probably a year to 18 months away, and after that we can then shift the tuatara over to the enclosure.
And that may just be what is needed to kickstart a redevelopment of the existing museum facilities. In Invercargill, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Some magnificent pictures of tuatara. They're a wonderful creature. It's a minute away from the news at 6. Lots of feedback coming in from people who use cannabis already for pain relief or mitigation of some description or others. Fairly graphic description. Prolapse discs, urinary tract infection. Some of you in real pain and say that cannabis is very effective, efficacious, I think is the medical term. Thank you for those stories. We will keep an eye on how the Select Committee goes on that. And Lou says, talking about the Wahine disaster, the real miracle and lesson of the Wahine disaster is that 681 people survived. What a tribute to the Kiwi spirit. Love, Lou. Well, it's very nice to get a text with love in it, Lou. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you all for your feedback tonight. Some of you, boy, you live with considerable amounts of pain, judging from your texts. We're going to be back at the Commonwealth Games, and we're going to look at what the weather is going to do tonight after the news.
RNZ News at 6. Ngamihi. Good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. Residents of a coastal settlement in Taranaki are bracing for more bad weather tonight after a tornado swept through early this morning. About a dozen homes lost their roofs in Rahotu. Numerous farm buildings were destroyed and power lines are down. 7 families have had to be relocated. Incident controller Sergeant Andrew Russ says the focus is now on preparing for strong winds expected tonight.
Obviously, the tornado was that caused all the damage. But now it's caused the damage. You've got a lot of iron in that line around, houses exposed. So then you get that southerly coming through, and it can cause more damage. So we're trying to get the farmers to clean up the iron, that sort of thing, and secure that so it doesn't become a missile.
Sergeant Andrew Russ says it will take weeks to clean up all the mess. Power is now back on in most of the National Park village, which was also hit by a tornado earlier today. Search and rescue teams are checking houses for damage and should be able to tell people soon if it's safe for them to return home. About 40 damaged properties have been cordoned off, and there'll be police and security guards keeping watch overnight. Fire and Emergency has had about 40 weather-related call-outs in the wider Auckland area. Met Service says gusts of up to 120 kilometres an hour have been recorded at the Manukau Heads. It says a string of thunderstorms has now passed over Auckland, but more strong winds are expected later tonight. The head of the Tasman Police District, Senior Sergeant Stu Coford, says roofs have also been lifted in both Westport and Greymouth. Grim weather didn't dampen the spirits of those marking the 50th anniversary of the Wahine disaster in Wellington Harbour today. Although 20 boats couldn't make it due to the weather, 30 other vessels braved the wind and rain to be part of a flotilla this afternoon. Tony Cord took dozens of students out into the harbour for the event. He was around their age when he helped rescue those on board.
I was with the Otaki college kids today, and there was a comment on, was it emotional? I went, no, not emotional, and then I noticed I did have a tear to my left eye, so obviously it is a bit emotional, even though I sort of try and be hardy about it.
Tony Cord says 50 years on, there's parts of the day he can't remember and says he doesn't want to. Meanwhile, all passenger ferry crossings across the Cook Strait have been cancelled. Tomorrow's sailing schedule will be reviewed overnight. An independent economist says the government is tying itself up in knots with its budget responsibility rules. The Finance Minister will unveil the coalition government's first budget next month and is already moving to damp down expectations, saying it's been left a mess by National. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Campbell says there was an underspend in the past 9 years, but it was deliberate because National's focus was on getting back into surplus. Before the election, Labor set itself a series of budget rules, including reducing net Crown debt to 20% of GDP in 5 years. Campbell says those rules are constraining the government. He says the promises it made require much greater resources than it can manage while paying down debt. Mr Yakov says it will either have to reduce its promises or bite the bullet, borrow more money and spend it. Atu i te whare pārimata ko Chris Bramalaho.
Nurses will announce this week whether an independent panel will be used to resolve their pay row. Nurses rejected the second pay deal proposed by their District Health Board employers last month. It led the Prime Minister to propose the parties use an independent panel to resolve the impasse. The nurses' organisation spokesperson, C. Payne, won't say what the outcome of 2 weeks of discussion with DHBs will be, but says it will be revealed later this week.
I can't say whether it's yes or no because it'll be important that we communicate that first to our members, and we'll be doing that when we're ready. We're still sorting through some matters.
C. Payne says whether it's a yes or no, nurses will continue campaigning and preparing for possible industrial action. Vanuatu's foreign minister has denied Australian media reports that his country is considering hosting a Chinese military base. Ralph Regenvanu's comment follows reports citing preliminary discussions between Vanuatu and China about a military build-up in the Pacific country. The reports centre on a recent Chinese-funded expansion of the wharf on Vanuatu's biggest island, Espiritu Santo. However, Mr Regenvanu has told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation the reports are false. He says no one in the government has ever talked about a Chinese base. It's 5 minutes past 6. Sport weightlifter Laurel Hubbard says an injury to her elbow from yesterday's Commonwealth Games final could be career-ending. Hubbard badly hurt her elbow during her attempt to lift 132 kilograms in the women's 90-plus kilo final on the Gold Coast and had to withdraw from the competition. She says she's seen medical staff and her elbow is busted. Her coach Simon Kent says Hubbard has completely ruptured a ligament.
It's going to need surgery, and obviously elbows are a pretty integral part of our sport. So at 40 years of age, yeah, it's going to be tough, but that'll be Laurel's decision whether, you know, in 6-12 months' time, does she pull the pin or does she come back again?
Simon Kent says he's impressed with Hubbard's attitude at the Games. Olympic rowing champion Hamish Bond says his bronze medal in the men's cycling time trial at the Commonwealth Games this afternoon has only fuelled his desire for more success, and he now has the Tokyo Olympics in his sights.
Yeah, I'm on a fairly steep trajectory to get to where I need to be come, ultimately Tokyo, I guess. And this was probably a requirement to perhaps justify committing more time, more effort. But, I'm enjoying the process. I'm learning a lot about myself, and that's what life, I guess, is all about.
Hamish Bond. Still with the cycling, Linda Willemsen has won a silver medal in the women's time trial. The gold medalist from Glasgow rode well, but the Australian favourite Katrine Garfoot came home nearly 55 seconds quicker. And the Warriors have named an unchanged starting lineup for their match against Brisbane this weekend as they chase their 6th straight win of the season. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nick Bollinger samples the latest from Unknown Mortal Orchestra, while Trevor Reiki revels in some WOMAD bliss. And this week's pundit, our military historian, Damien Fenton, marks the centenary of the German Spring Offensive, possibly the crucial battle of the First World War.
And on Lately at 10, we feature Lately Reads with NZ book lovers and an author reading. We'll have an eye not only on books, but music, people and politics, keeping you up to date with the world at the other end of the day. Lately with Karen Hay on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Watches and warnings are in force for a significant winter storm. For all of the North Island, periods of rain or showers with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms. Snow lowering to 700 metres about and south of Taihape this evening. Possible damaging wind gusts until early morning. Rain turning to showers tomorrow, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms. Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough inland from the Kaikoura Ranges. Showers with snow above 500 metres clearing this evening. Severe gale southeasterlies easing this afternoon. The coastal Marlborough and Canterbury, showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms, and snow to about 500 metres. Severe gales about the Sounds until evening. For Westland and Fiordland, fine, and gales southeasterlies easing today, fine tomorrow. Southland and Otago, showers with hail and snow to 500 metres, gradually easing, then clearing later tomorrow. The Chatham Islands, periods of rain, heavy at times. It's 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. The autumn storm sweeping the country in a moment. Just a warning in from NZTA, if you are in Auckland and crossing the Harbour Bridge on or in something slight or high-sided, do be careful of those wind gusts. We will talk weather in a sec, but let's go first to the Gold Coast, where cyclist Linda Willemsen has just won silver in the 25k women's road trial. That's a real test, that course. Her silver medal follows a bronze won by Olympic rower turned cyclist Hamish Bond in the men's event, the same course this afternoon, and a flood of medals overnight. Joining us now from the Gold Coast is our sports reporter, Joe Porter, who is beaming and live. Joe, it's lovely to have you with us again. Let's talk about the cycling. Good day in the road trial.
Yeah, absolutely. Cycling once again proving a great place for medals for New Zealand. Hamish Bond up first in the men's time trial, sitting in that hot seat for a long time in top position, the gold medal position, before being bumped back to bronze. But a fantastic effort from the former Olympic rowing champion. He's not long been a cyclist, so quite an incredible journey for him. And then Linda Willemsen, of course, a wonderful athlete who's had success in the past, but can be up and down at times with her performance. Silver in the women's time trial to go one step better than Hamish, and a fantastic result for the veteran cyclist for her. So wonderful day for New Zealand in the road time trial.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic night last night for David Litty, who won what was a surprise gold, although I think David is... He snuck in under the radar a little bit. I think there were some people who had high expectations for him. So he did magnificently with the combined weight of 403 kg, which was a Commonwealth record. Laurel Hubbard, though, heartbreaking from her withdrawing from the competition due to injury. What's the prognosis for Laurel long term? Is this the end of her career, Joe?
Well, it could be, quite potentially. Laurel herself said today that her arm is busted, for lack of a better medical term, and she's going to have to undergo surgery to get it fixed. At 40 years old, it's going to be a long road back for her to get back into a competition where that part of her elbow is particularly important for weightlifting. Simon Kent, her coach, spoke to Kate Newton today from RNZ and discussed exactly what Laurel would need to do to get back into competition, and the fact that her career might now be over.
Joe, we have that interview somewhere, but it's not popping up at the moment. You're still there, aren't you?
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, well,
I'm here, John.
Well, we're delighted you're there. I can hear the wind. Gosh, it's windy on the Gold Coast. We've got it, so let's go. Sorry, Joe, stay there because I want to talk to you in a sec. Let's go back to Laurel Hubbard's coach talking to Kate Newton.
Laurel intimated outside she's completely ruptured what's called the medial collateral ligament of your elbow, so it's going to need surgery, and obviously elbows are a pretty integral part of our sport, so at 40 years of age, it's going to be tough, but that'll be Laurel's decision whether, in 6-12 months time, does she pull the pin or does she come back again?
Yeah, obviously not the way she wanted these games to go.
No, but I've been really impressed by her attitude. I was out back with her, and my gut was to not go for the heavier weight, but she looked me in the eye and she said, no, I want the 132, and I wasn't going to say no to it. So I love the way she just wanted to come and not just turn up, to actually test herself. So full credit to her, really.
Yeah, and I mean, you say sitting backstage with her and she told you that she wanted the heavier weight and then went out there and that happened. I mean, kind of what was running through your mind at that point?
Well, that it's sport. You've got to be, you can't make decisions based on what ifs. So, Laurel's done 131 before, so I didn't put it on thinking this could be injury potential. Look, she got really buoyed by the reaction she got when she went out for her first lift. That really energised her and gave her the confidence to want to go out there and try records.
it would have been great to be able to ask her this question, but I mean, how do you think the experience has been over here for the games with sort of everything, I guess, that has kind of gone on, both the injury and, reaction to her inclusion has kind of been for her?
Yeah, look, she's taking it all in her stride. She's very much a valued member of our team, and the few days she's been here, she's blended in and fitted in well, not just to the weightlifting team, but to the wider Olympic team, Commonwealth Games team. It's a hugely complex issue, but as the current legislation stands from the IOC and then our governing body, the IWF, those are the rules, and people are entitled to their opinion, but at the end of the day, she's pretty courageous for what she's been doing.
Simon Kent, Laurel Hubbard's coach, talking to our reporter Kate Newton. Let's go back to Joe on the windy old Gold Coast too. I hope you're back with us live. Thanks, Joe. Interesting watching David Litty last night. So excited, and that is a beautiful story of possibility. I can't wait to see what that kid's going to do. Tom Walsh, he won gold and looks slightly bummed out that he didn't set a new world record. You were there, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. He was a little bit disappointed. He was really chasing that world record very hard. He still thinks it's well within his reach. Unfortunately, it was sort of Tom Walsh versus Tom Walsh last night, and his mental game got the better of him. And he just he tried too hard, essentially, and technique was foregone because of that. Disappointing in some ways, but of course he's now a Commonwealth Games champion, and he's got many big throws ahead of him. Still a wonderful result for Tom Walsh, and he should still feel very proud.
Well, any medal prospects tonight, Joe?
Yeah, a quieter night for the New Zealand athletes tonight. There's a few members in the pool racing. Jessie Reynolds and the women's hammer throw. Julia Ratcliffe is a gold medal, a genuine gold medal contender. So we'll be back at the athletics track keeping an eye on that. And just before I go, John, I would just like to say that Laurel Hubbard has carried herself with grace, dignity and humility throughout this competition, in the face of a lot of controversy, in the face of a lot of dissent from other people. And
till roof after roof from homes, destroyed farm buildings, ripping out power lines and even lifting cattle into the air. That does seem extraordinary. Farmer Geordie Mullins was milking at the time.
Tornado just came straight over top of our cow shed and then ripped over all of the houses and all the barns, starting from the bottom of the farm and worked the way right up through the middle.
So how was it for you where you were?
Oh, we were stuck in the vat room, so all the windows and everything imploded and sucked in on us. So it was just me and Jake Corrington just hanging on for dear life.
Yes, indeed. Louis Van Wyck owns the Tongariro Crossing Lodge in National Park, Central North Island. Puffing because he'd just been running to escape the rain, he told our reporter Zach Fleming what it was like when a tornado hit there.
We were indoors having a coffee when we just started hearing this massive wind coming through, and it just like the whole house started shaking and air pressure dropped. You could feel it in your eardrums, and then it just everything rattled and shook, and then it passed, and then we head outside, and we just saw trees and bits of corrugated roof lying around our property, and we realised it wasn't ours, but from other properties around the area, across the road.
How long do you think the whole thing lasted for?
Well, it felt like no more than 30 seconds.
What's the lodge like? Is the lodge okay?
Yeah, we're unscathed really. I don't know, we were really lucky. There's someone's chimney flue that landed between two of our buildings, a piece of roofing that landed in our garden.
Sorry, a piece of chimney? Someone's chimney came off?
Oh, yes, yeah. Chimney flue, yeah.
That must have been some really strong wind.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it actually took out an entire house down the road, and it took the whole roof off a house just across the road from us. And
when you say took out a whole house, what do you mean? Standing on the road, if you try and describe that house to me, what does it look like at the moment?
It's crumpled, completely crumpled, yeah. There's just framing and unity framing and roofing just all crumpled on the ground.
Are the people inside okay?
Oh, there was no one inside. It's someone's holiday home, and so yeah, it was empty at the time.
Right. And that house across the road from you with the roof torn off, are those people okay? Are they your neighbours? Do you know them?
No, we actually don't know them. They're just one house behind the houses across from us.
But they're okay. They were in their vehicle at the time, just leaving to go somewhere when it hit, and so they were luckily not in the house, which is good because on the beds there were beams. So I've just been in there we've been helping them get all their valuables out, and there's glass everywhere on the beds, and there's nothing, there's no roof on any of the bedrooms or the lounge, and beams lying across the couch, the beds. So if they were in the house, I don't think they would have come out unscathed at all.
Louis Van Wyk talking to Zach Fleming. Real damage in the centre of the North Island, and those winds heading north. Auckland, Northland, Coromandel, Waikato tonight. A short time ago I spoke to Met-Service meteorologist Georgina Griffiths.
We've had the whole lot. We've had heavy snow and thunderstorms and heavy rain and gales, severe gales in fact. For places that don't normally blow, much of the country has been impacted. Really deep and good snow down in the southeast of the South Island, and most of that is nearly done. So the next hour or so, those snow warnings remaining in force. The Kaikoura ranges will be lifted. But for the North Island, gets snow from tonight and overnight. Central Plateau, Desert Road has heavy snow watch in force and a road snow warning for 10 to 15 centimetres on the Desert Road and a few centimetres at the top of the Napier Taupo Road. So unlikely to settle there because the ground's still quite warm. It is only April.
Yes.
But yeah, the North Island about to get a bit of snow too. And of course it's blowing upper South Island around Wellington till about midnight. Auckland yet to have a very big kick in the bottom tonight. So, you know, we're not used to the breeze up here, John, and this is a pretty high-end wind warning.
What are we talking about, Georgina? So what's Auckland going to get?
Oh, I mean, we'll be easily, we've already seen a few gusts to 120 kilometres an hour today, and I think we're going to sniff a few 130 kilometre an hour gusts just from after dark until about midnight in that Waikato, Auckland, Coromandel region. And that's top-end wind for us. It's already seen a lot of branches down and probably a fair bit of power out, but we haven't seen the worst. So from Auckland point of view, it's been a windy day, in fact a very gusty one. But the worst is yet to come until about midnight. So from about 8 till about midnight, that's when Auckland is, or the far north, Waikato, Auckland, Coromandel, sees the worst of it. So we're not quite through yet.
OK, what's causing all of this? What's going on here?
Oh, well, a good cold outbreak coming off the Antarctic. So that's what we call a really long fetch southerly. I mean, gee. And it combined with some really good juice from the Tasman Sea, a lot of moisture. And the two things combined, and that's how you get deep snow. I mean, we know we had 5 centimetres through a lot of the places where people live, Mount Cook, Tekapo, Twizel on the hills. But, you know, the snow gets higher just outside of Mount Cook with 40 centimetres, for example. And we don't sniff at 10 to 15 centimetres on the Desert Road. That's a decent dump for us. We've had a lot of heavy rain around Taranaki, Wanganui, down Taihape Way, and we're still raining in places like Wellington at the moment. Of course, thunderstorms. Very cold air came up, and it gets very unstable because our seas are still quite warm at the moment, John, after 5 months of abnormal warmth. Yeah, and so those thunderstorms had quite a lot of Taranaki got hit this morning with some decent lightning strike numbers, 6,500 in a short space of time as that active front went through. Auckland got a good burst of thunder as that line went through. In actual fact, we had a warning in place for that line for Northland and the northern part of Auckland around lunchtime today because that line had pedigree for damaging straight line winds and or damaging tornado. And I know everyone thinks it's been a tornado in National Park in Taranaki. It's more likely just to have been a what we call a downburst, a straight line, but very intense wind. Same thing, does a lot of damage. So that line had pedigree for wind.
And do be careful if you are out in the wind driving tonight in the north. Georgina Griffiths, of course, from the Met Service. Most of Auckland's Waitakere ranges will be closed off to the public from next month, a move welcomed by many. But some businesses say they'll have to shut up shop. Some tracks were closed last December and a rahui was put in place for the whole area, but there were lots of pressure from environmentalists to do more. In February, the Council's Environment Committee proposed more extensive closures in the regional park and to close high-risk tracks in the Hunui ranges in order to prevent the spread of Kauri dieback. Today, Auckland councillors voted in favour of that, meaning from next month only selected tracks will remain open. Our reporter Tom Furley was there.
All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against?
No. With that, the future of the Waitakere ranges was set.
From May 1st, the park's forested areas will close to the public, leaving 44 coastal and other tracks remaining open if they meet standards preventing the spread of the disease. In the last 5 years, the proportion of diseased kauri in the forest has doubled to 20%. Penny Holst chairs the Environment and Community Committee and says it's the most important decision for the forest's future.
We've got Aucklanders who love the Waitakere Ranges and, they tramp and they run and they walk in this beautiful area. We've got businesses that operate out of the ranges, but we've also got a biosecurity issue. We've got kauri dieback disease that is now, spread in many areas of the ranges, and that's where our responsibility kicks in. We have to take a decision on how we stop the spread of that disease.
The move has been controversial. More than 800 submissions were made when it was up for consultation, with almost half feeling the council planned to close too many tracks. Before the vote, the public was given a final chance to address council, with hikers and business owners pleading their case. Many businesses said it would have a substantial effect on them. Among them was owner of AWOL Adventures, Campbell, who says businesses like his should be exempt as they pose a low risk.
The situation we now find ourselves is completely out of our control. Everything I have worked for is now on the line. We're looking at losing our entire business, 20 years of hard work and excellent operation.
The council has a list of 44 tracks which will remain open. However, of that list, 9 are still questionable, with work to do to ensure they don't pose a risk, including creating boardwalks and installing cleaning stations. That list was questioned by both the Tree Council and the local iwi Te Kawaro Amaki. Iwi spokesperson Edward Ashby told the council they were happy with 13 of the tracks to remain open, but were concerned about the rest.
As of right now, I don't believe that the majority of those tracks are fit for purpose, but we are committed to work forward with council as part of the rolling opening.
Later this month, before the closures are in place, council staff and iwi will together walk the tracks and decide whether they're fit to open. The council agreed to make it a joint decision, which Penny Holst says is rare.
It's a big step for council, to be honest. Often it's done in consultation or, as an afterthought. We've taken a bit of a step forward today to say, as a council, we will be doing this absolutely in partnership with Te Kawaro Amaki, and I think it is a brave step.
Over summer, after the first raft of closures was announced in December, the council had problems with many people flouting or ignoring the decision. As well as pushing the rules via its communications channels, the council says people can expect to see more staff at track entrances. People who are found in closed areas can be trespassed, and those not following boot cleaning rules can be prosecuted. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
Let's turn to Facebook now and Cambridge Analytica. What a story this is. Up to 87 million users worldwide are believed to have had their data mined. In New Zealand, it's believed 10 people who downloaded a personality quiz app exposed 63,000 Kiwis whose data may have been mined. It all comes as Facebook head Mark Zuckerberg arrives on Capitol Hill in Washington, where he's due to face 2 congressional hearings tomorrow into the data breach. He's already admitted the company did not do enough to prevent the misuse of the information. The BBC's Amar Rashan reports.
In less than a decade and a half, one company has done more than any other to connect the world, and not always in a good way. Each time we scroll, share or like something on Facebook, we leave a digital footprint. And our personal data can be scraped by developers of apps or applications, some of whom pass that information on to companies such as Cambridge Analytica. The British data firm's alleged use of such data has plunged Facebook into the biggest crisis in its history. Some 87 million users' data ended up in the firm's hands, 1 million of them British.
What you've seen on TV.
This mathematician and entrepreneur gave evidence to MPs at the same time as a whistleblower who worked for Cambridge Analytica.
The Cambridge Analytica story shows that their policies and practices are not sufficient to handle our personal data properly. So I wouldn't trust Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg for that matter with our personal data. The personal data is an extension of ourselves. Do we really want to sell it? Just like we would sell an organ maybe. So we have to be very careful there.
This evening, Facebook started pushing out notifications to users. It could take up to 48 hours to reach everyone. One message will be sent to all users, showing how to remove apps they would rather didn't have access to their data. Other notifications are being sent specifically to those targeted by This Is Your Digital Life. It was this app, which an academic used to harvest information, that was sent on to Cambridge Analytica. People who downloaded the app and their friends are being notified that their data has been shared. Not so long ago, most of us kept our most personal information in hard copy. If you lost it or if someone took it, then maybe one person would have access to that precious information. But now most of us leave such information online, and there such information can be scraped, shared or marketed to thousands of people. And once you lose control of it, it's very hard to get back. Tonight, founder and chief executive Mark Zuckerberg arrived in Washington, eschewing his usual t-shirt and jeans. Testifying twice this week before US Congress, he's expected to say Facebook failed to live up to its duties. Zuckerberg seems to be saying sorry rather a lot at the moment. He'll do so again this week.
But will he mean it? That report from the BBC. It is almost 29 minutes past 6. A lot of feedback coming in. Nikki in Te Anau saying, please, in the twilight, have your headlights on when the weather is grey and bleak and rainy. Someone telling me not to use the phrase bummed out, and also telling me to slow down. Actually, I do sometimes go too fast, and I will watch that. People talking about, lots of people contacting us about the Commonwealth Games and their favourite athletes or competitors, and we're hearing from Ed again, who is a big Holly Robinson fan. I don't know whether Holly is related to you in some way, Ed, but in Okarito and Bannockburn you are huge Holly Robinson fans. Holly, of course, got the silver in the javelin last night, lost to the other Holly. Boy, that is a rivalry to cherish, that one for the ages. The same 1-2 combination in Rio, is that right, Ed? You'll know. Anyway, thank you for your feedback, and thank you all of you who are celebrating the New Zealand team and their achievements on the Gold Coast. It is lovely to have such congratulatory and delighted texts. We appreciate it, and we appreciate your company, and we will be back tomorrow night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. People in coastal Taranaki and Ruapehu district are bracing for more wild weather tonight after tornadoes swept through today. Buildings in Rahotu and National Park Village are badly damaged and more than 1,000 households remain without power. An economist says the government is tying itself in knots over budget responsibility rules. Parts of Auckland's Waitakere Ranges will be closed from next month to stop Kauri dieback spreading. And residents of Waihakia are pushing for more blood tests to check if they're affected by toxic firefighting foam. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Unknown Mortal Orchestra's Sex and Food combines dystopian visions with Ruben Nielsen's complex musical imagination. I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be reviewing the album and the sampler. I'll be discussing the Trump-era country of Courtney Marie Andrews, while Elliot